This is Julian from Straight from a Scientist podcast, and I'm here with JP today, a very close friend and fellow language learner. So, introduce yourself.
Hello, Julian. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Of course.
A podcast. It's really nice to be here.
So, tell me a little bit about yourself. You are a teacher.
I am a freelance English and Spanish teacher.
Okay.
I mainly work with adults
Mm-hmm.
and also as an in-company teacher. I'm also a translator and interpreter.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
Yes, I studied translation and interpreting in Vitoria, which is close to Pamplona, about 1 hour from Pamplona, on the University of the Basque Country.
Nice.
Yes, so what I do mainly is teaching. I do have a few translation and interpreting assignments, but it's mainly teaching what I do.
Now, for what are the main languages? I guess English is your main.
So my main language, of course, English and Spanish. So I'm a native Spanish speaker. I'm from Colombia. Yes, I'm a Colombian,
Nice.
Colombian Spanish speaker. But I've been here for 9 years, a bit more than 9 years. So naturally, I have some deep knowledge of Castilian Spanish.
Yeah, basically, so for the listeners, what is the difference between South American Spanish and Castilian Spanish? This is something for me. I didn't know there was a difference until I came here.
So it's basically like the difference between UK and North America. Only that I don't like the term South American Spanish or Latin American Spanish because
Latino? No.
The thing is, no, it's true that there are that all South American countries or Latin American countries share some common features.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't do the the and theta, for example. That's one thing, and then a few. So of course, grammar is very similar, and actually many of the differences that I have across Atlantic between the UK and the British Isles and well, actually Commonwealth and North America are also reflected on South American versus Castilian or European Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
For example, verb usage and tense usage, where you in English, you're an American and you would say, I don't know, did you eat already? And maybe in the UK they might say, have you eaten already?
Exactly.
So we've got the same in South America, but although there are some differences, but basically in like I in Colombia would say, ya comiste?
Yeah.
Whereas here they would never say that. Oh, they say, has comido, ya has comido. Yeah, stuff like that. So there are some common features, but then again, in many respects, I mean, if you are to translate, for example, if you ask me to translate something into Latin American Spanish, I would say, well, who's going to be like your market if you're I don't know, launching a website and your customers are mainly Mexican, for example? There are many differences with, especially in terms of lexicon vocabulary.
So within South America, each country has their own version of Spanish. I've definitely found, yeah, exactly. Mexican is very different than Colombian or Venezuelan.
Yes,
Chilean.
Exactly.
Interesting. Now, what about books? I know the written Spanish is really different, and just like a book from Spain. How different would it be than a book in, for example, in Colombia, in your country?
That I'm not so sure. So my feeling is that, and I'm sure that the same thing happens in English, and maybe even in just about any European language, the written language tends to be more formal.
Yeah. So would the written language be more similar?
I think it would.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, what you have is, so you're right with the, should we say, common standard.
Yeah.
And so of course you will see dialectal or differences reflected on written Spanish just as you would in written English. And of course, even, I mean, with literature, you've got American editions and British editions and editions and so on. But I think then there will be fewer differences. That's my feeling.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, what got you into learning languages? When did you really start? When did you realize you wanted to?
My family, my extended family. Most of my family on my mother's side live and even were born in the United States.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yes, and so when they came over to visit us in Colombia, you would hear, you know, the cousins or my aunts or my uncles or whatever speaking English, and that was, you know, that was sort of exotic, and you know, and so I want to learn that. And then again, I can't speak for the rest of South America, although I guess it's the same as in Colombia. There was and there is a big sort of urge for English learning, learning foreign languages.
Yeah, I think there's a big push to learn English in South America.
Yes.
In my experience. And Mexico too, right on the border.
Yes.
A lot of my Mexican friends speak
exactly.
excellent English. So tell me, what languages do you speak now? How many and what? I know you speak a couple. But...
I do, but like I can really speak them and I can really communicate.
Well, this is a big
because
people, what is the difference? Everyone has a different level of fluency for them, right? It's like,
yes.
I can speak a language. What does that mean? You know,
it means you can communicate.
For you, it means exactly. And I'm the same. Some people, it means I have the B2 and the European.
That's a big thing here, and I'm not sure about the rest of Europe, but definitely a big thing in Spain.
I think for me, it's less important about what I have on my resume than my ability to communicate.
Yes, indeed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some of the languages that you speak and your journey in
Well,
you had to learn them.
Which is an ongoing journey. Actually, it never ends.
That's one thing that people don't realize about languages.
Yeah, the thing is, it's a finished process. You never finish. Well, so of course I speak Spanish, I speak English, and I would consider these two to be my two languages and the ones I work with. Yeah. So I hate the word expert, but if you were to call me an expert in anything, then I would say my expertise is in these two languages. Then so I first started learning French at school at a very early age, actually a little before English, but I never sort of developed it. And actually, I thought I spoke French till I went to France, and I discovered I didn't. Yeah. Okay, and then when I started university when I was like 18, I started learning German. I started learning German, which has been an ongoing process till today. So for many years I started learning German, I dropped it, then took it up again, dropped it, took it up again. But for the last, say, 5 years, 6 years probably, I've been, learning it like seriously, attending lessons at university, then with a private tutor, and now I can say I can communicate with German. Yeah, I also go to a German speaking group every Thursday here in Pamplona, so it's a group of people who get together to speak German. And
that's actually how I met JP. Was in the Spanish speaking group. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
They have an English Friday, Spanish Saturday, and Italian on Sunday.
Yeah, I've got lots of groups.
So that's okay. Well, we can get into kind of what kind of strategies you use to teach your students, and what do you think is a good way to learn a language? Because I know, at least for me, I thought it would be a lot easier than it was when I first started learning Spanish.
Right.
But yeah, so tell me what your experience is with that.
Well, so naturally when I started, I applied the techniques that I used, myself, back when I started with English, practical when I was an adolescent, which is mainly trying to, I just watched lots of series and the usual thing, series and films and stuff, and of course you would at the beginning you wouldn't understand anything. You would watch the films or the series with subtitles first in Spanish, then in English.
Yeah.
You would start recognizing words here and there, and so that was the first approach. But of course, it's more than that, because with students, not all students are motivated enough to do that sort of thing. So of course the usual drills and not just fill in the gaps on the books, but also oral drills. Yes, lots of videos, but not films, not like feature films, feature length films, or even so. Usually short videos you can work with, really in depth and analyze phonetics and grammar, and so sort of applying. How shall I explain this? So the idea is that it's not to get rid of grammar and the formal stuff. It's incorporating it into the actual language, which is basically speak and listen.
Exactly.
And well, of course write and read, but that'll come later. But it's making the student aware of the fact that grammar is there, and that they'll need to draw on that to understand what they're watching, and also to express what they want to say.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think it depends on the level that the student is at. I think at the beginning it's really difficult, and once you kind of get over the first hump, it becomes easier. It becomes more enjoyable. You can start watching movies and listening to music and understand a little bit more. And then eventually you can start having conversations. But I think for me, at least, the beginning was so difficult because it's kind of frustrating. You're learning everything, but you can't really do anything yet. Interesting. Now,
yeah, but if you just let me say something there, I think you can start talking from the very beginning.
Yeah, I've heard that you need to start talking day one.
That's
the way to do it.
Of course, I'm not gonna ask you about your expectations for career expectations or something. It's just basic conversation, but you start with how are you, what's your name, what you like doing in your free time, things like that. I mean, and that's conversation. That's what that's what it's about. Exactly. And I think it can be, well, of course, it depends on the sort of person you are and your interests, but it can be exciting from day one. Then again, of course, if you're not the sort of person who likes learning languages, it's going to be a little more difficult.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I was going to say is that you need to have motivation. Without motivation, it's almost impossible to learn a language. You need to have a reason.
And the goal,
learning languages, and that was one of the main things they said, is that you need a motivation or a reason. Otherwise, you probably won't get,
past the few. Yeah, I guess motivation is one thing. And then also one very important thing that I try to do with my students is to try and find an emotional link to what they, not just motivation, not just why you want to learn Spanish or English, but also tell me about the things you're interested in the language that you're learning. So that's what I mean with emotion, and there's scientific research on that.
Yeah, I can tell you about that. Right?
Yeah. So I'm terrible with authors and theories and stuff, so I forget everything. But basically, I think it's very important, and that's one thing that we teachers sometimes forget, is that you have to talk to the student in a language that they understand, and to talk about things they're interested in. Exactly. There's no point in preparing a lesson about food, for example, which here in Spain you take for granted that everybody likes talking about food. But then you come against students who tell you, well, actually, I don't like food, and I've bumped into some students who've taught me that, and I was just completely.
You don't like food?
You don't like food, and they said, well, no, and I actually, and they would tell me things like, and it's really annoying to have to talk about food because, especially if you live in Spain, and so I hate it and everything. Well, okay, so let's not talk about food. What you're interested in,
Yeah, I guess it is difficult depending on. I mean, you have a huge group of different students. I wanted to add quickly that so you said that you have to be emotional, and that's really interesting. You said that because I'm going to explain a little bit how memory works. And memory, our strongest memories are that of emotional memories. So if you think about your childhood or anything like that, anything 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the only memories you have left are ones that have strong emotional imprinting, right? Am I right?
Right. Yes. Yes.
So that's one thing, and that's because there's a part of the brain called the limbic system, or a system in the brain, and one of the things, one of the parts is called the amygdala, which is in charge of emotions, and this is directly connected to something called the hippocampus, which is where memories are formed. So it's all interconnected. So when you're stimulating a strong emotional response, it's automatically sending messages to the hippocampus and reinforcing memories based on what you're seeing, smelling, hearing.
Right.
So that's one reason. I remember, I'll tell a funny story about this. When I came here in Spain about 2.5 years ago, and my first month here, I was staying with one of my friends, Nacho, and with him and his family. And I was just learning Spanish. I was decent. I could get around, and I was actually pretty good at that point, but I wasn't advanced. So I remember talking to his mom about something. I think she was going on vacation to some beautiful beach or something, and I told her, I was like, estoy muy celoso. So in celoso, for me in English, jealous. I was trying to say I'm really jealous, and which is funny is that jealous.
Yeah, you can't say that in Spanish. Yeah.
In Spain, you don't really say that because you want to say envidious or envidioso.
Yeah, envidioso. Right? Yeah, in Spanish, because in Latin America that wouldn't work either. If you're jealous. Exactly. It's because you think that your partner, your romantic partner, is cheating on you.
So basically, I told her I was like romantically jealous of her.
Yes.
She was. I remember that moment because she was like, "What are you talking about?" And then she kind of explained it to me, and I was so embarrassed, and I will never forget that.
There's another false friend.
Exactly.
Embarrassed.
It's a false friend. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Embarrassed. Embarazada.
But it is pregnant. Yeah, pregnant. And people might use my Spanish students of English might say it, and she's embarrassed, and she's.
So that's and that just goes to show that one of the cool things about learning languages, if you have these emotional experiences, then I never forgot.
You'll never forget. You'll never forget.
I will always know celoso.
Yeah, you'll never forget it.
So that's really cool.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk to you about let's get into this. Do you think that this is a huge topic of interest, and I almost want to say myth in my eyes, that kids learn better than adults languages, second languages and third languages? What is your opinion on that?
Well, so I might be, should we say, biased because I've read about it.
Yeah.
And so it seems that it's scientifically proved that that's the case, that kids do learn faster and better, but it does make sense.
Let me argue my point a little bit. I could say, let's take the accent out of this and let's just talk about speed of learning.
Okay.
I think if you take a kid and he's 5 or 6, or let's say 6 or 7 years old, and you put him in a school where he's half of the time in Spanish and half the time in English, he's going to learn a lot of Spanish, right? Over the course of 1 or 2 years. But if you take an adult and put them in the same situation, I personally think the adult's going to learn faster. They already know how strategies and what they use to learn, how they can study better. I mean, the kid is just going to be absorbing things passively, whereas the adult, I can see putting more time and being more methodical, strategical.
But I see your point, but
because for me, I've been here in Spain for 2.5 years, and I think if you put a kid from ages 5 to 7.5, I'm going to learn way faster than he did, because
But well, on the one hand,
but the one
yeah,
thing,
okay,
the kid is gonna have a better accent. Accent is something really hard. It has to do with motor patterns in your muscles in your
yeah, it's
mouth
like
and producing the sounds.
it's physical.
But as
Yeah.
far as vocabulary, and I think that I can learn more and faster than a child. Just
Well, my experience with kids is, I was going to say limited, but it's actually null. So I've no work with kids, but um, I the thing is that on the one hand, language learning isn't like learning, I don't know, maths, for example,
Yeah.
which is you learn a formula and you apply it systematically. Language learning is not only you have to know, but also use it. It's more like learning how to drive.
exactly.
So when you learn how to drive, it isn't enough to know how the car works, but actually knowing when to put first gear, second gear, that sort of thing. And that's got to be, yeah, well, you're an American, you should know about first gear, second gear. Yeah, that's got to.
My first car was shift manual, so
okay, so you learned it.
Yeah.
No, but point is, it's not something you rationalize. You just have to make it automatic in your head. So that being said, and then I think that kids are like less biased and have less of less, I don't know, barriers
Well, yeah.
to absorb learning. And then you, as far as what you were saying about adults being methodical and knowing how they learn, I don't think it's that's not my experience with adults. Many adults don't know how they learn. They aren't that. So you've got adults who are methodical and know what they want, know how they learn, etc. But you've got some others that are just and you have to guide them. That's your job. Guide them through their language learning process.
I guess I'm biased too, because I was an English teacher the past couple of years too, and
Right.
I was kind of trying to find the best way to learn the language myself while teaching it and all that. And what I found, actually, I wanted to ask you if you know anything. First off, if you use Duolingo.
I don't.
You don't. Do you approve of it? Do you think it's good? Do you think it has its place?
I barely know it. I think that but
it's like a popular app that people use. It's based on something called spaced repetition, which I think is really cool. Basically, it's like it's an algorithm that some engineers and computer scientists made that basically is supposed to gauge the memory of humans and to say, okay, within 1 week I will forget it. So this application asks you in 6 days.
Yeah.
And then after 6 days, it will maybe be 10 days because depending on the algorithm.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You don't have any experience.
Yeah. When I say barely know, of course I've heard about it.
Yeah.
But I mean I haven't worked with it. Not because I don't think it. Not because I don't think it works. It's just I've never worked with it. But I think that it is a tool. And as far as, I mean, I don't think there is the one tool that's gonna get you speaking English, Spanish, or Chinese in no time. I don't believe in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's one tool, and there's many. I used one not for language learning, but for memorizing vocabulary, but for interpreting, which is a whole different thing. But I used one that was very similar. That was called Memrise. Memrise. And it worked out very, very well for me when it came to. Oh no, hang on! I also used it for German, but then I just stopped doing it. But out of laziness, I just.
Yeah.
But I think it can work. I mean, I've got nothing against it.
I think it's great. Actually, I will tell you my experience with Memrise. So Memrise is really cool. They use the same spaced repetition, which is this algorithm that the computer scientists have created. And they also use the emotional aspect that I was talking about. So they have pictures, sound. And when it comes to memory, the more senses of your body that are connected to it, and the more likely you are to remember it. So if you smell something that's connected to paella, for example,
into an emotion,
paella, and then you taste it, and you smell it, and you hear people talking about it, then all those senses combined, and paella is now imprinted in you. So
yeah, it's like 3D experience.
So this is what Memrise does, and they do it really well. I remember using it, but I too got lazy after a couple months. But I think
but I think it does work.
And they also use mnemonics, which are cool.
Yes.
That's another way to learn really well. Cool. Now, also one more thing I'm going to say about spaced repetition. I've also used something called Anki, which my friend who's in medical school told me about. It's the same exact thing.
Never heard about it.
But you have to create your own, like, kind of flashcards.
Right.
So it's very similar. It uses the spaced repetition, and you create your flashcards with the word, and you can put audio and all this stuff and pictures and all that. And I found this really useful for me. I think I used it my first year here, and I think I learned like 3,000 Spanish words, and I could tell you every single one. Like, I learned a lot.
Wow.
And it shows you graphs, and me being kind of like a nerd, I love graphs. I'm like, wow, okay, so I learned these words really good. I'm still learning these. These are okay, really young. I'm still really don't know them that well. So for me, that was kind of like, if you're an engineer or any sort of math or science,
if you're just good at numbers, or you like, but also if you're the sort of person, and this is important, there are many people who find it difficult to set themselves like goals, and who lack the discipline to that. That's actually where self-discipline, and that's the thing, and that's one of the reasons why teachers are also important, that they sort of motivate you to. I mean, you can learn, and many people learn without a teacher. I did, but
I was going to say that too. Self-learning goals, and this is kind of what I did too. I think for me, it's not about studying a lot one day. I think you have to start really small. And I found this to work too, but you have to be dedicated to it. You have to be methodical. You have to be disciplined and
persistent and persevering.
Yes, but it's everything. For me, language is about compound interest. You have to put a little bit of work in every day.
That's what I tell my students as well. Yes, you're absolutely right.
All of a sudden, one thing I wanted to say quickly about learning languages that I really enjoy, and for me is one of the most beautiful things, is that the results are beautiful. You can see a result, like having your first conversation in a different language, or being able to order food or understand a taxi driver,
or understanding something you've seen in a film, maybe something you've seen thousands of times, and then one day you say, that's what she was saying. That's what he was saying. That's what
Exactly.
That's really rewarding.
It has a lot of reward. Yeah, for me too. That's one thing that kept me going.
Yeah, and definitely your first conversation. Yes, that's also really.
The first conversation.
Yeah.
I recently experienced that with Italian. My brain was thinking in Spanish.
Yet another group, another conversation group.
On Sunday.
Yes.
But I just spent 10 days in Italy with the girlfriend over Christmas time, and I had went one in August for about a couple weeks. But when I was there in August, I could understand and talk, but it was really broken, and I wasn't, fluent really.
Yeah.
But this time, I studied. I think between August and December, I did like 5 minutes of Duolingo and maybe some of this Anki words. And then I watched I think one season of an Italian TV series. The 3 months I did a little bit of work every day. But I have to tell you, when I went in December, it was like, I had been studying for months. So it was really cool. I had a great experience, and it was exactly that feeling. The compound interest. I worked just a little bit every day, but it was enough to have really good conversations, to be able to understand almost everything. So.
Well, it's really.
It's been cool.
Good. Yeah.
I have to pick the next language.
Yeah.
I need to be like you and speak 4 or 5 languages.
Well, in my case, so I'm not that disciplined, I must say, with Duolingo and stuff. But in my case, what really works, and there's, I think, the emotional part of it is, for example, with German, which I've been struggling with. The group I attend, we meet up every Thursday, and I say I attend a group, but really it's really informal. It's really we just hang out and we just get together for a bit. But my German has improved. I cannot tell you how much. I mean, I also had a private teacher, and it's another part of it. But meeting these people and really being able to speak German, and that feeling of satisfaction. I mean, when I went to Germany some 4 or 5 years ago, and I was hopeless, and people would they would see you were struggling, and they would immediately switch to English.
Exactly.
That was so frustrating. But now, when I meet with these people every Thursday, and I speak to them, and I'm able to actually hold a conversation. I remember one day holding a conversation with Angelica, who's a close friend of mine, and Angie, and she would start telling me about stuff. She's an architect. I studied architecture, and she would tell me about things, and she would speak really fast, and I was like, wow, I'm understanding everything she said. Well, not everything, but I know what she's talking about. You know.
You need to go back to Germany and
I do.
Plan a trip.
Yes, I should.
That's next.
Cool.
So I wanted to tell you a couple things. I was doing a little bit of reading on the literature for multilingualism.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a really cool study that was showing the effects of people that are bilinguals and polyglots on Alzheimer's disease. And they found that just by knowing a second language, you can delay Alzheimer's up to 4 years, which is crazy. And one thing I was, after age 65, between 5 and 10% of everybody will get Alzheimer's. And after age 85, it goes up to 40 to 50%. So it's almost like you have 1 in 2 chance of getting Alzheimer's when you get really old. So that's one thing that's really cool. The brains of people that are bilinguals or polyglots are very different than those that are not. And, it shows them a younger brain, it's just interesting.
Wow.
I don't know what your thoughts on that.
Well, I've been reading a book. I haven't finished it. I'm terrible with names. And it's from scientist who's also working on this, and he was talking about he wasn't conclusive as to, or he isn't conclusive as to, the effects of, in this case, bilingualism. He's from Catalonia, which is a bilingual region.
Exactly.
But he did mention the benefits of being bilingual, and it seems that there is a relation between speaking more than one language and how your brain, I don't know, is geared or reacts to Alzheimer's. Again, many of these scientific findings, to my mind, I think they're things that make sense, because if you've been exercising your brain by learning a language, it's like it's going to the gym. And so it does make sense that you should be sort of better prepared to face Alzheimer's. Although, if I'm not wrong, I also read that you're better able to delay the onset of the illness, but once you have it, the decline is sharper.
The cognitive decline from
exactly.
The disease will go slower. That makes sense too.
Yeah. Actually, it was something that it would be sharper in all. So the onset of the decline is delayed, but once you start going downhill, it's actually faster. But again, he wasn't conclusive in this. So I don't know. He said himself that this needed to be further researched on.
Yeah, I was surprised when I was doing a little bit of reading that there's not really a lot of studies on this type of thing. Something that I've always been interested on. I'm studying neuroscience now, and I'm always like, what is the difference between the bilingual brain and just a normal brain?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, they found. I'm going to just tell you about a couple of correlational studies that they found. These obviously are just correlational. It doesn't, 100% mean that it's true.
Right.
But there is a correlation between bilingualism and just memory skills, problem-solving abilities, and intelligence, and also spatial abilities, which is really interesting. Lastly. Yeah. Anyway, I agree with you. I think they need to do a lot more studies on this. I'd be interested to know kind of more like locational studies. Are both languages, in different parts of the brain,
Right.
or are they in the same part, or is there like one compartment for English, one for German, one? That'd be really interesting to me to
Yeah,
know.
that's got to be fascinating.
And also thinking, I'd like to know. Obviously, I don't know about you. What language do you normally think in? This is a strange question.
Well, Spanish,
Spanish.
actually, which is
But you
my
ever
my
think
mother
in English,
tongue.
for example?
I do. If so, of course, most of my day I work in English,
So
because
sometimes,
most of my students are students of English. My students of Spanish are a minority at the moment. But so I do. There is a point where I think in English, and I've dreamt in English.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's funny. I think that I used to think in English more when I was learning the language. Also because I was like more emotionally attached to it.
Yeah.
I was sort of in love with English. Whereas now English and I are like an old couple, and we're used to one another.
Yeah.
But now I'm more into like German and other languages maybe.
Well, so this is one thing I wanted to just ask you about. There's this huge myth and just kind of thing that people say. I don't know if it's a myth or not, but they always ask you when you're learning a language. People will always ask you, "But have you dreamt in it yet?" It's
Yeah.
always for like I've always heard that it's like a level when you dream in the language, all of a sudden you have a
Yeah, like now
fluency.
you are a
Yeah.
B2 or something. I don't know whether that's true.
Now,
Yeah.
my experience is like, okay, if I've had a full day in Spanish, I've been talking to people in Spanish all day, I probably will dream in Spanish.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And
Doesn't
if
it?
I'm, I don't know, speaking English all day or something like that, I'll probably dream in English. So for me, but it took some time to dream in Spanish. I think it took at least a couple months of learning.
Hmm.
And I'm like you too. I start thinking in the language that I've been talking most of the day, which makes sense.
Yeah, I think what I have read or heard somewhere is that you can only count in like in your mother tongue,
Yeah,
in your native.
I
Yeah, that's one of the things they say that.
Or do math. I've heard.
Yeah, they have count and do maths, and add or subtract, and the arithmetic.
I think the reason you do math in your mother tongue is because you learned how to do math in your mother tongue.
That's one thing, and then numbers are much more abstract.
If you learned how to do math in Spanish, for example, but spoke English the rest of the time, you probably do math in Spanish.
Yeah, I don't know. Of course, if I'm.
It just is. If I learned how to play the guitar from a Spanish teacher, and I had to explain someone how to play the guitar, I'd probably do it.
Maybe it's switching. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But it does make sense that because if language is emotional, it makes sense that numbers are so abstract.
Yeah.
Then maybe it might be easier to remember them in your native tongue. Then again, of course, if I'm with my students, English class, of course, we'll add or subtract or whatever in English. Yeah, so I don't know. It's
complicated.
Yeah, are there any studies on this? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't know. Yeah.
I'd like to see though, like we use either fMRI or different PET scans. It's like a magnetic resonance imaging.
Oh, okay.
And they kind of see like which parts of the brain are working in different activities or tasks that they give you. I'd love to see like someone thinking in one language and then thinking in another language, but this would be really difficult to do. Like the same person. Or doing, I don't know, just doing different things. They might actually have studies on that. I'll have to check that out.
That'd be cool.
Last thing I wanted to talk to you about. So I was reading a little bit about the Foreign Service Institute of the U.S. Created like a list of languages and how easy or difficult they are to learn. So with the most easy, my English is getting worse every day here in Spain. The easiest would be Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian. This is for English learners.
Okay.
And they're saying anywhere between 550 to 600 hours and about 20 to 25 weeks of learning. you think that's accurate at all, or?
Again, I think
the level depends on the person.
But and it depends on of course for speakers of English. Yeah. It would make sense that it would be easier to learn, say, German or Dutch than it would be to learn Chinese.
Yeah.
So I guess so it does make sense, but this is like the Anglo-Saxon perspective.
Yeah.
You have to ask a Chinese person
exactly
what's difficult for them.
You're right. You have to try to see it from
an Arabic a speaker of Arabic.
Yeah. So to give you something to compare, so in Spanish they said to 20 to 25 weeks, 500 to 600 hours.
Yeah.
Whereas something like Chinese, they're saying about 88 weeks and over 2,200 hours.
It does make sense, and then of course if you
is crazy, yeah.
Yeah, but if you think a language, if you think that a language reflects a way of seeing the world, it does make sense also that for you it would be easier to learn Spanish or a Western language, which is pretty much the same.
Yeah,
we've got lots of things in common.
Yeah,
historical ties and even religious and cultural. So it does make sense that it's easier to learn for you. I mean, even though Spanish is a Romance language and English isn't.
Yeah.
But still, it would be easier. That would be to learn.
But still not easy.
Chinese.
With not conjugation in Spanish.
Yeah, right.
So difficult.
I know. Yeah, but still, if you are to compare it, I don't know a word of Chinese, but I'm sure that it's easier than Chinese for you.
Funny you say that. I was talking to a Chinese guy last night. I had dinner with him, and he was telling me that Chinese is all characters. So
is it? Yeah.
You can't. I mean, everything is a character.
Oh, right. Okay.
Character. I mean, like.
That's got a name. Ideograms, I think. Ideographs, something.
Hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
But he was saying that in order to just be a functional member of society, you need to memorize at least 3,000 characters. And then he said, I think he's like, I probably know about 5,000. Which that's a lot, and each character, they all look the same for me.
Yeah, no, I've got a friend who's learning Chinese, and she's been since I've met her, she's been learning Chinese. It's taken her like 4 years and she's really methodical and disciplined, and it's taken like 4 years just to get the basics.
Yeah. And
now she's in China, but I mean it's a really hard process.
And I think you have to be methodical for Chinese. And I want to say, in my opinion, I think a spaced repetition system would be excellent for Chinese, because you have to learn by memorization almost, is what this guy was telling me yesterday. It's just brute force memorization a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's just memory. So memory's been, at least here, the last few years, memory has been dismissed as something of the past, but it's not. It's nonsense, because learning a language has to do with memory. Well, learning has to do with memory.
Exactly.
It's true that it's not just about memorizing stuff, because it's also finding a link to emotions and being able to use that to express your ideas and so on, and find connections and so on. But memory does play a central role in.
It's a huge role.
Yes.
I guess so. For last tips for people that want to start learning a new language, I think, like JP said earlier, is find something that you're passionate in, and you use that as a way to learn the language.
Yes.
I had a good friend that loved old Spanish music and flamenco, and he would just listen to it all the time, read the lyrics, translate it, and through that he learned so much. For me, my journey was more methodical. I kind of like the 5-10 minutes a day,
right?
And then just see what happens over 6 months. It adds up to many.
That's great. That's great.
But I think for everyone it's different.
Yeah, you have to find your own. You have to know yourself.
Yeah.
Know thyself, and then. But I think one thing, and of course you can combine things. So you can combine Duolingo or flashcards or whatever, and with the more emotional, and you should actually, the more emotional part of it, which is, it's not just something that you're passionate about, but be prepared to talk about something you want or something you like.
Exactly.
So language is about wanting to communicate something, and language is communication. So basically it's about wanting to speak about something and wanting to hear something from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So once you find what you want to hear from somebody else, and what you find what you want to talk about, I guess that's what it's about.
Tips for anybody that's starting out new languages? Or
be patient. Be patient and be patient to yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a long journey, and now this has become a bit of I've forgotten the word, a bit of a cliche, but enjoy the journey.
Yeah,
so,
that's true. And
but it's true, yeah.
One of my best friends, who actually the one who got me into this Anki system, he told me it's better to travel well than arrive. And that was like a quote I really liked. It really resonated with me, you know. We always forget.
True.
It happens to me a lot. I forget to enjoy the journey because I'm so focused on the goal. You know, I need to learn 2,000 words. I need to do this. I need to do that. And I always get, you know, so caught up in the end result that I forget about the journey. And it's hard to come back and be present. But I think you're right. Enjoy it. And last thing for me, I think a big sticking point for people is just shyness. You have to be able to get out of your comfort zone.
That is really difficult for some people.
Really difficult.
Really difficult. It's one of the things that teachers have struggled with. Telling,
to talk to, you know, that's huge. I think the more you are willing to be uncomfortable, the more you will become comfortable. You know, you have to just push yourself. But it's hard. It's hard,
and it's something you have to, again, be patient to yourself, be patient to your student if you're a teacher, and sometimes you just have to find a way around that shyness, and maybe sometimes it's better not to push and just to find a way around it.
It's a personal journey.
Yes, so you don't want to talk, okay, let's write, or let's read, or and then just try to get them to talk a little. That's really, and then encourage the student, or if you're a self learner, encourage yourself. Like say, okay, so I haven't made this mistake today, for example.
Yeah.
So today I didn't say celoso, and
exactly.
I learned something.
That's I'll tell you one quick story, and then we can wrap this up. Is that when I first came here in Spain, it's so everybody uses voice messages on WhatsApp, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's very common. In the US, nobody uses voice messages. So for me, this was so weird. And then I had to use voice messages in another language. And I was like, oof, I was so nervous at first. I was like, wow, I'm going to sound stupid. I'm going to make mistakes. And I can't delete the message after, So that for me was something that I had to conquer my shyness and say, okay, just send the voice message. Stop worrying about making stupid mistakes.
So now you do it.
Now I realized that I was okay. I just have to send voice messages every day, and then I'll feel more comfortable. And now I just like to, now I love it. I love voice messages.
This is something I have yet to conquer, even in Spanish.
Really?
Yeah, I'm terrified of.
Really?
I don't like my voice at all, and so it's like I never do it. Really? I always write. Yes.
I love what now I'm addicted. I got all my American friends sending voice messages.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, why do you send me voice messages? Now they're like sending me voice. Like I just got a voice message from my friend, 22 minutes long. And I was like, oh my God, I don't even have time to listen to this.
22 minutes.
But it's a good way to contact.
That's a diary.
Instead of just writing something, I think it's an excellent way also to practice languages too. That was something that got my spoken Spanish better, I believe, is just sending voice messages to friends.
Oh, that's a good tip. I had never thought about it.
Yeah.
I might,
because you have to speak aloud, and
I might try it with my students.
Try it out.
I will.
And maybe even
Thank you.
introduce them to Duolingo too.
That's something I have yet to work on a little.
They actually have Duolingo for tools. Teachers. I used it too.
Do they? Okay.
And you can track progress and all that.
I'll check it out.
The future.
Okay.
We'll see.
I'll check it out. Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We're wrapping up this episode on language learning. If you enjoyed it, please send us any comments or criticism or anything. Check us out on iTunes. Give us a review if you like us, and thanks for listening in.